Coming up, despite recent bad weather, protests for trans rights continue. And a spot gets filled in a State Department amid opposition.
Ukraine struggles as it enters its third year of war.
All that and a profile on the Vice President, along with important dates this week in history, making sure your facts are straight.
Also, where presidential candidates are during their campaign trails, the latest from polls, and something for you to consider.
Good evening and welcome to The Update, your home for news and politics.
From the local level to nationwide, we're keeping you up to date. I'm Jordan Tovar.
And I'm Johnny Valtman. And Jordan, keeping it local here, still tons of things going on around the Iowa City area. Any updates from last week?
Yeah, Johnny, last week we saw some protests, and this week we're going to see even more protests. Transgender community members and their supporters came together to speak out at the Iowa City City Council's meeting on Tuesday night. Those who spoke listed their expectations for the City Council going forward.
We have been told our entire lives that if we want to make change, we need to get involved in local politics. And that's what we're here doing. But now that we're here, now that we are demanding to be protected to and listened to, what are you doing in response?
Among speakers' lists of demands included making Iowa City a sanctuary city, meaning that Iowa City would not prosecute those who break Iowa's new transgender laws. Another concern brought up was affordable housing, with reasoning stated that living needs to be affordable as Iowa City is to be a sanctuary for trans people. Last week, we saw people gather to protest for trans rights outside YAF speaker Paula Scanlon's speech at the IMU. This week, another trans rights-related protest will be taking place, this time at the Pentecrest. If you remember last year around this time, a rally similar to this was planned in Washington, D.C., but was canceled due to threats against trans people. Protesters will gather Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. with a march taking place at 8 p.m. So, Johnny, as the weather heats up, more people are going to come out, and that means more protests.
Yes, Jordan, and some things may be boiling over, and they already have at the state level. And that's why we're going to send it out to Cara, who has more on what's going on in Des Moines.
Thanks, guys. Iowa Department of Education Director Mackenzie Snow was confirmed on Tuesday after being appointed by Governor Kim Reynolds last June. She was confirmed with a vote of 35 to 15, with only Republicans in support of her. Democrats voiced their opposition to her appointment, as Snow has never held a teaching license in any state.
Mackenzie Snow is a polite, articulate, intelligent individual. Unfortunately, though, she lacks the experience, training, and leadership qualities to serve as the director of the Iowa Department of Education.
It is crucial that we choose a director not merely for their policy expertise, but for their understanding and commitment to the educational needs of our Iowa students. Please vote no to Snow.
Before coming to work for the Iowa Department of Education, Snow is deputy director for the Virginia Department of Education. Republicans say this makes her plenty qualified for the position in Iowa.
She's someone that leads. And at this time in the state of Iowa, we need someone that'll lead.
This particular situation might have been a loss for the Iowa Democrats, but a new poll suggests that things may be turning around for them. The Des Moines Register/Mediacom Iowa poll from late March found that many voters in Iowa's 1st congressional district would choose a generic Democrat over a generic Republican. 49% of voters would choose a Democrat, while only 45% would choose a Republican. Now, Iowa's 1st congressional district tends to be a more competitive one for the Democrats, but these results could hint at coming change. It's important to note, however, that these polls are very early, so they probably shouldn't be considered an incredibly accurate reflection of what we'll see in future elections. Jordan and Johnny, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Cara. And Jordan, while things are going on within the Iowa legislature, there's also things going on around other legislatures around the country.
Yeah, Johnny, we've been talking about things heating up, and they're certainly continuing to heat up around the country. So we'll send it out to Jayce Bertrand, who's got updates from around the nation.
Thanks, Jordan. And on Monday, the Florida State Supreme Court ruled on the state's abortion ban. The ruling upheld the state's 15-week ban on abortions, while also allowing for the state's legislature to pass a much stricter ban on abortions later than 6 weeks after conception. Exceptions to the bill are made for rape, incest, human trafficking, and pregnancies which threaten the life of the mother. The Supreme Court also ruled in favor of a referendum in November which would allow Florida residents to vote on an amendment to the state constitution. This amendment would allow abortions up until viability during the pregnancy. Outside the U.S., Ukraine is continuing to struggle in its war against Russia. Earlier today, Ukraine announced that it would be lowering the conscription age from 27 to 25 in order to relieve the troops on the front line. Meanwhile, NATO is working on plans for long-term support to Ukraine for the duration of the war. While NATO cannot provide lethal supplies such as ammunition to non-member nations, they are able to send funding and food supplies to the nation. Congress's most recent spending bill allocated $60 billion for Ukraine, but the funding has yet to reach the nation. And a natural disaster has struck Taiwan. Over 1,000 people have been injured and 9 have been killed after a 7.4 magnitude earthquake struck the island nearly 100 miles away from the capital city of Taipei. While earthquakes are common in the area due to its position in the Ring of Fire, this is the largest earthquake to hit the nation in 25 years. And I'm going to send it back to Johnny and Jordan in the studio.
Thanks for that, Jayce. Now, Johnny, we're still in the dark about what a lot of the vice presidential candidates are going to be in this cycle, but there is one that we know for sure.
Yes, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announced his last week. Donald Trump still doesn't have one, but Joe Biden, he's had his for a while, and that is this week's candidate profile. Vice President Kamala Harris will be running it back with Joe Biden for the 2024 campaign. In Oakland, California, on October 20th, 1964, she would shift around the Midwest because of her parents' work at universities. She'd also attend high school in Montreal, Quebec. Harris would attend Howard University, graduating with political sciences and economics degrees. After attending the University of California, Hastings College of the Law, and being admitted to the California Bar in 1990, she'd work as a deputy and an assistant district attorney throughout Southern California. In 2004, she would win the 27th district attorney position for San Francisco, holding the job for 8 years. In 2011, she would then become the 32nd Attorney General of California, and then serve as a state senator from 2017 to 2021. But on August 11, 2020, Joe Biden selected her to be his running mate for the 2020 election. As vice president, she was tasked to reduce the number of unaccompanied minors and adult asylum seekers, along with leading negotiations with several countries. Harris has also set a record by casting so far 32 tie-breaking votes in the split U.S. Senate, and for 1 hour and 25 minutes, she was the acting president while Joe Biden went through a colonoscopy. However, Harris has seen some of the lowest approval ratings from a vice president. She has seen some high staff turnovers within her staff. If she does get elected for 4 more years, she would hopefully like to change those 2 up. And speaking of Joe Biden, he's on the campaign trail. Donald Trump's on the campaign trail. Just seems they continue, they're almost like a rock band, Jordan, just going around the country, going to these big venues and, getting a lot of supporters.
Well, Johnny, like a rock band, these presidential candidates are on tour, so I'm just curious as to where they are around the country this week.
And that's why we're going to be sending it over to Grace Lathrop, who has where they're at and what venues they're at.
Thanks, guys. Campaigns are on the go as we get closer and closer to the next election. Yesterday, former President Donald Trump made his first campaign stop in Wisconsin, hosting another rally. However, it didn't necessarily go as planned, as he is now facing backlash for spreading false information. Trump stated at the rally that he won the state of Wisconsin before, and although he may have won the state in his 2016 campaign, he lost in Wisconsin in 2022. However, he told the crowd that he knows he won the state in 2020 as well as in 2016. He also challenged Joe Biden to a debate while at his Wisconsin rally.
I'm calling on Crooked Joe to debate anytime, any place. We'll do it anywhere you want, Joe.
Trump has also made it clear that one of his biggest platforms is his stance on immigration, and says that Biden's current immigration policies are destroying the country. Meanwhile, President Biden is using Trump's stance on abortion as a way to create campaign ads against the former president. Trump is one of the leading figures responsible for terminating Roe v. Wade, something that Democrats and Biden himself intend on changing. Biden recently released a campaign ad attacking Trump's stance on abortion and his work to rid of Roe v. Wade, according to the Democratic Party. Abortion bans are limiting reproductive freedom, and they also stand by the belief that abortion is the fundamental right and care that should be provided to all women. Biden has stated multiple times that above all else, he is a firm believer in freedom of choice, something he thinks Donald Trump is taking away from the American people. With campaigns taking off, candidates are sure to give more insight on what they believe the most important issues to focus on are during this year's election. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Grace. And Jordan, I saw you had a couple numbers and polls in there, and I know that you missed poll watch last week, but I believe you're doing it again this week?
Yeah, I am. Johnny, it's good to be back. Like you said, Grace did it last week because I gave you something to consider, and Grace did a masterful job. But I'm just happy to be back watching the polls again. So our first poll of the day comes from the Des Moines Register, which takes a look at which party's candidate would be preferred in Iowa's 4 congressional districts for the U.S. House of Representatives. In 3 out of 4 congressional districts, a Republican candidate is preferred. The lone exception to this is District 1, which covers here in Johnson County and the Iowa side of the Quad Cities in Scott County. Overall, though, Republicans hold an overwhelming advantage, with the left side of the aisle with a 54% to 37% lead at the moment. Now, we'll take a look at the presidential race for this November. The trend across most polls dealing with this race has had a clear theme. Trump is going to edge Biden to the Oval Office. A poll done by YouGov shows a change in this narrative, however. This one shows the two men in a dead heat, with both sitting at 43%. Also included in the polls are independent candidates Robert Kennedy and Cornel West, both sitting at 2% and 1% respectively. And you know, Johnny, like I say every week, these poll numbers, one day they're going to go down in history, but you've got some historical events you'd like us to look at right now, don't you, Johnny?
Yes, Jordan, and there's going to be a trend this week, and it doesn't have to do with presidents, and it's not a good trend. On April 3rd, 1948, President Harry S. Truman signed the European Recovery Program, also known as the Marshall Plan, into effect. While Europe was still recovering from World War II, the Cold War was starting to heat up, so America would lend a helping hand to European economies to avoid a potential rise in communism. The United Kingdom, France, and West Germany received the most aid from the plan, as it was tailored to give Allied powers during World War II more money than the previous Axis powers. While the Soviet Union was offered to participate, they declined. When the plan ended in 1951, Europe was back up and running. Industrial and agriculture production significantly increased, poverty and starvation dwindled down, and the continent would have a prosperous two-decade run, which elevated living standards throughout the countries. On the same day in 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated on the balcony of his own hotel. King was in Memphis supporting an African-American sanitation walkout after the death of two workers in February. While in Memphis, King marched the previous week with the workers, but after it turned violent, he returned to organize another march. The day prior, he gave his final speech, the "I've Been to the Mountain," where he referenced previous assassination attempts. While standing on his third-story room's balcony at the Lorraine Motel at 6:01 p.m. while talking to Reverend Jesse Jackson, King was shot in the face. He was rushed to the hospital but would not wake up, dying at 7:05 at St. Joseph's Hospital. James Earl Ray, a former convict, was arrested 2 months later in England and pleaded guilty for killing King. King's surviving family in later years came forward saying that Ray didn't shoot King. While there was evidence suggesting Ray did it, ballistics tests suggest that the bullet that killed King was not shot by the sniper Ray used. The FBI, CIA, the mob, and others have been linked to conspiracy theories about the assassination. And 4 years into a civil war, the Rwanda genocide began on April 6, 1994. A plane carrying Rwanda President Juvenal Habyarimana and Cyprien Ntaryamira, the Hutu president of Burundi, was shot down, with neither the Hutu or Tutsi tribes claiming responsibility for the attack. Through April 6th and 7th, several high-ranking country officials were killed. The genocide would last until July. It's estimated that a total of between 491,000 and 800,000 Tutsis and 10,000 Twa were killed. It is also estimated that between 250,000 and 500,000 Tutsi women were raped during the time frame. The 4-year-long civil war ended and the Congo Wars would follow. And for our wrap-up, NATO officially formed in 1949. The Pony Express had its first ride, and Sandra Day O'Connor became the first female Supreme Court Justice. And Jordan, some darker stuff there, but whenever we get the fact check, I always find something that makes me smile.
Yeah, you know, Johnny, it's always quite humorous for me to hear what Jayce has to say. And you know, us as journalists, we are taught to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, and that's factual information. So we'll send it out to Jayce, who has our fact check for this week.
Thanks, Jordan. And today we're going to look at some new claims surrounding the collapse of the Key Bridge in Baltimore. The video shown here is being circulated on social media with claims that the explosion depicted within it was the true cause of the bridge's collapse. However, the video does not depict Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, but rather the Kerch Bridge in Crimea, which was partially collapsed in 2022. And staying in Baltimore, we're also going to look at posts involving a senator's wife. Claims have arose online which link former Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell's sister-in-law to the bridge's collapse. Angela Chow, who served as the chair and CEO of the Foremost Group, a shipping company, died on February 10th after driving into a pond while intoxicated. The posts online are now claiming that the Foremost Group owned the ship which struck Key Bridge, implying that Chow's death is suspicious in light of the collapse. However, there are several flaws in this theory, mainly that the ship was owned and managed by the Synergy Group, a shipping company based in Singapore, while the Foremost Group was based in New York. And with an incident as tragic and chaotic as the Key Bridge collapse, it's safe to assume that dozens of ludicrous theories are going to be appearing online, but the best way to avoid panic is to trust the facts and the facts alone. And now I'm going to send it back to Johnny and Jordan in the studio.
Thanks, Jayce. And Jordan, we've been through just about the whole show. Cara's only been on here once, so that only leaves one thing left for her to do.
Yeah, Johnny, and last week I gave you guys something to consider, so I'm certainly interested to see what Cara has in this week's For Your Consideration.
Thanks, guys. This week, I want to talk about fundraising. A few weeks ago, I broke down Biden and Trump's campaign funds for this election and the 2020 election, and we saw that small dollar donations are actually pretty significant. In the 2020 election, almost half of Trump's campaign funds were made up of small dollar donations amounting to about $378 million. He hasn't been able to keep up with that number this time around, which is proving to be a hurdle for this election. In March, Biden said that nearly 97% of his then $155 million raised for this election were made up of small dollar donations as well. That's a lot. The point I'm trying to make here is that donations add up and they do make a difference. Now, I am in no way saying that you should donate your money or that you shouldn't donate. It's your money, you do what you want with it. I'm just saying, be mindful of who your money goes to if you choose to donate, as it can have a substantial impact. Or, as we're seeing with Trump, not donating can also be a contribution in its own way. By making the conscious choice to donate or to not donate, everyday citizens can hold a lot of power. Jordan and Johnny, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Cara, and thank you for tuning in to the update tonight, where you'll find all your news and politics.
Tune in next week for more updates from the local level to the nationwide level.
From the update, I'm Johnny Valtman.
And I'm Jordan Tovar. Have a wonderful night.